No, I reflected during the break, and what I realized is I'm less a vocalist and more of a harmonizer. That's
Oh,
really my strength.
oh no, I'm the
Yeah.
harmony queen.
No, no, no.
Oh no, no, no,
Listen,
no,
listen.
no, no.
Here,
You might be the king. I'm the queen.
let me give you an example of my harmonizing. So here's a little harmonizing of "Here Comes the Sun." Pretty good.
Well, yeah, well, mouth it like you're singing it. Okay.
Isn't that pretty? Thank you. So I think
Wow.
I've made my case.
Well, can you just sing no? Just sing it.
I just harmonized "Here Comes the Sun," or Tico, the magic parrot from Florida, did. One of us did. All right. Anyway, back to serious business.
Yes, I'll harmonize later.
We have things to distill. And President Trump on Saturday night in North Carolina at that GOP convention spoke about the investigations to which he's been subjected over the years, the impeachments, as well as the investigations he'd like to see completed. That's sort of where he started.
And by the way, where's Durham? What happened to Durham? Has anyone seen Durham? All of this for nothing. It's a shame. It's a shame. They do things a little bit differently. We'll never let it happen again. Now they just send the same information from the no collusion Mueller investigation to corrupt politicians in New York. They send everything that they've already gone over and over and send it into New York. Let the radical left prosecutors go after Trump. Just give it a shot, they say. Give it a shot. They failed in Washington. They failed all over the place. Between the impeachment hoax number 1, impeachment hoax number 2, all of these investigations, we failed. Let's send it to the radical left prosecutors in New York. Maybe they can have more luck. They'll never stop until November of 2024.
But the failure wasn't Special Counsel Mueller's, the Department of Justice's alone. It was also the media's. And that's effectively the topic of a new book by Barry Meier, who's a former reporter for the New York Times, entitled Spooked, The Trump Dossier, Black Cube, and the Rise of Private Spies. Barry, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Well, thanks so much for having me on. It's a pleasure.
A book review I read of your offering over at the Federalist described your book this way. I wonder if you agree with it. Meier has hammered the third nail in the coffin of the Steele dossier. Nail 1 was Special Counsel Robert Mueller's April 2019 report. Nail 2 was the Justice Department Inspector General Horowitz's December 2019 report. Your nail 3.
Well, I think it's fair to say that there is general agreement, that the Russians did try to interfere in the 2016 election. We don't know how successful they were, but the Steele dossier, or these opposition reports that were put together on behalf of the Hillary Clinton campaign, which suggested that Donald Trump and members of his campaign were colluding with the Russians, seems to be based on rumors, hearsay, and supposed facts, which have essentially been proven to be wrong by Mr. Mueller, the Justice Department, and I kind of go through a forensic analysis of it in my book Spooked and come to the same conclusion.
How did the dossier exist in the media sphere for so long, despite the series of various outlets, investigators that debunked the claims?
Well, people seized on it, and I guess there were many people who thought that, wow, if this is true, that's the end of Trump. And but none of them kind of went and analyzed the report, examined it. Who were Christopher Steele's sources? Where was this information coming from? As journalists, we are taught and we are trained to scrutinize things, to try to determine what's the primary material, the primary information. And what I tried to do in Spooked, along with other stories, was look at what was the primary material from for the Steele report, and was it based in fact or was it based in rampant speculation?
Well, have you tried to find, or has anybody spoken to Christopher Steele, where he is now and how much money he was paid to write this dossier?
Well, we know how much money he was paid, and we know that he continued to make money from for doing the kind of research he was doing after the 2017 election. I tried to speak with Christopher Steele. In fact, I went. The book starts with my going to visit him at his home in this lovely little village outside London. And, he refused to see me. I mean, Christopher Steele, like many people in this kind of private intelligence or private spying business, they're happy to speak to journalists, but only if they think the journalist is going to serve their interest. If there's someone that comes along and wants to scrutinize them with the same intensity that they claim to be scrutinizing their subjects, they are not interested in that whatsoever.
Yeah, you term them private spies. Other people would say opposition researchers like Fusion GPS. After your examination of this, the entirety of this, what did you come away with respect to Fusion GPS, which is another instrumental part of the story?
Right. I mean, I essentially all the firms that occupy this industry, if you will, and it's totally unregulated. They are hired guns. They're effectively mercenaries. And one of the stories I talk about in the book is how Fusion GPS, which was formed by two former reporters for the Wall Street Journal, were kind of monitoring a reporter at the Wall Street Journal, John Kerry, when he was investigating Theranos, this medical device company that proved to be a fraud. And so they were effectively kind of monitoring their former colleague without telling him about it. And that kind of speaks to the sorts of tactics and character, I guess, of people who go into this industry.
But I mean, I've run campaigns, so I've had opposition researchers put together profiles on candidates and so forth.
Yeah.
Or those persons related to candidates. And, you want the information to be verifiable, otherwise it's useless. So if Fusion GPS did such a slipshod job with respect to this dossier, that rather than being a kill shot for Trump, it has been a kill shot for, well, to some extent Hillary Clinton, to some extent the Democrat Party, to some extent sort of the deep state, if you will. I mean, it's fed suspicions maybe about Trump from people who don't like Trump to begin with, but it's fed suspicions about all sorts of individuals who weren't looking to be cast under this cloud by retaining Fusion GPS.
Well, my concern, I'm never was a political reporter.
Yeah.
My concern was the media. Like, I have been I was employed for nearly 30 years by the New York Times. Before that, I worked for the Wall Street Journal and other newspapers. And I am a great believer in journalism. I believe journalism can do fantastic things, provide a public service. And part of the reason for writing this book was to say, you know what, we as journalists need to scrutinize this type of information. We need to be much more suspicious of people doing opposition research. And we don't want to give them the type of anonymity that they want to have in order to, spread this information. But we need to hold them and ourselves accountable to a much higher standard.
Right, but no, mainstream reporters, they saw the Steele dossier and read it, and, about the P tapes and all this stuff, and just took it verbatim. They didn't even question it, don't you think?
They had moved into an area, of intelligence, overseas intelligence. It's very easy to verify things when they're in public documents here in the U.S. or whatever the case may be. But they were being presented with this guy, Christopher Steele. He was a former MI6 operative. He looked the part. He dressed well. He had beautiful hair. And he talked the talk. And people bit on it without saying, where is this guy getting his information from? Let me go back to the original source, because he wasn't letting them interview his collector. And when that information finally came out, he turned out to be this sort of itinerant intelligence analyst who had never worked for a intelligence agency before and was collecting kind of bar talk from his friends back in Russia.
That's the thing too. I mean, and even if it's difficult to verify, and even if some of the if you have a disposition that is anti-Trump, I mean, as a professional, if somebody comes to you with this information that includes all sorts of salacious allegations of a sexual nature and a personal nature, I mean, that doesn't, your spidey sense doesn't tingle at all. You just say, before I run with this against a presidential candidate, I better check this guy out. I mean, those sort of sensational stories would lead one to be more skeptical, not more not more believing.
I think we are living in a media environment where there are, news outlets on both ends of the political spectrum that are willing to report things that don't have much foundation to them. Here, this kind of bled over into what we kind of think as more mainstream news organizations. And I think it had to do with, the unique fervor of the time, the candidacy of Donald Trump, the hunger for this type of information, and a willingness, for God knows whatever reason, to throw what one generally considers to be journalistic rules of the road aside and run after rumors.
This has sort of been building for a while. Would you agree? I mean, I think of stories about John McCain having an affair with a lobbyist right after he was the nominee in 2008 that turned out to be, at minimum, unverifiable. I go back even before that to George H.W. Bush reporting that he had an affair that was, again, at minimum, unverifiable. But it was still reported. It was still put out into the public arena as part of the discussion in those campaigns. So it seems to me there's been sort of a gradual degradation that increased in speed under Trump.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And what I try to do in Spooked is trace this evolution, if you will, or devolution, depending on how you choose to look at it, where, the ability of these private operatives to infiltrate the media, to plant stories in the media, has really mushroomed and become far more toxic in recent years.
And part of this too, I wonder, is sort of the same thing that some media do with politicians, people in office. I don't want to offend them because I don't want to lose access. And sort of it's the same thing. I don't want to lose access to these guys that are close to candidates or close to organizations that have intel that could be useful sources to me. So I'll play ball.
Well, as I mentioned, I've never been a political reporter, and I guess that's one of the things I'm very grateful about because people who are political reporters make deals with sources. As you say, they'll protect sources. And, part of the reason for writing the book was to kind of pull away this curtain so that a reader, a viewer, a listener gets a deeper, better understanding of what goes on off stage and hopefully becomes sort of a more educated, skeptical consumer of news, regardless of where that news is coming from.
Now, are you a political reporter now, or do you feel you want to dive into that?
I certainly do not.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like you're
checking.
It would seem to be like the worst time possible to do that if you had any consideration.
I would say, I am very grateful. During my career, at the times I was offered the opportunity to, transfer to the Washington Bureau. And I would say to myself, that is one city I prefer to stay away from.
After writing this book, do you still think you're going to be invited to reunion parties at the New York Times with the Gray Lady?
I have to say that the New York Times has been incredibly gracious and has been welcoming in their reception for the book. They ran an extensive excerpt of the book in the New York Times. So, I would say that, the New York Times is among those organizations that is willing to engage in some self-scrutiny or some self-reflection. I'm pleased with how the Times has handled the book.
He is Barry Meier, former reporter for the New York Times, author of Spooked, The Trump Dossier, Black Cube, and the Rise of Private Spies. Barry, thanks for joining us. Good luck with the
And
book.
thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day out there.
Thank you so much. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Connect with Dan and Amy using the AM 560 mobile app. Download it today at 560.